Hello, once again to everybody that's members of the Suidlanders media channel. If you haven't subscribed yet or liked our videos, please do so if you do like the content. And this is another weekly events program hosted by me, Marius Greyling, and of course, Simon Roche, our expert that we talk about, that keeps his finger on the pulse of the things that's happening across the world. Hi, Simon. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thank you very much, Marius. I'm back in South Africa and I'm staying at my son's flat, and it's delightful to be with them. So yeah, I'm doing well.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, there was quite a few things that's happened in this past week, but like we discussed off air, I think the biggest one, especially that will impact us in South Africa, will be the tariffs.
Yeah. The long and the short of it, Marius, and please interrupt me because this could become a 25-minute monologue, just to begin to address the subject, is that Donald Trump has implemented policies that he believes rectify trade imbalances or trade biases to trade partners of the USA. In other words, that over time things have gotten out of hand and that the USA is at a disadvantage. And the way to rectify that is to charge tariffs. And for those people who don't understand how tariffs work, it's very simple. Let's say I'm the USA and you're South Africa, and in the USA, I have a chain of shops. And one of the items that we sell is biltong from South Africa. And every month I import 10 tons of biltong at, call it 300 Rand a kilogram. And then I sell it in US dollars for 400 Rand a kilogram. So I import it for about $15 a kg, and I sell it for about $20 a kg, roughly speaking. When a tariff is imposed on biltong, for instance, the tariff is not paid by the producer of the biltong or the motor car or the lawnmower or whatever. It's paid by the importer. So when the goods reach the customs and excise, either at a port, a seaport, or an airport, or whatever the case may be, when they're in the bonded warehouse, they have to be released at some point. In other words, they've come in, the government has, the state, I should say, has taken those items and is holding those items, preferably for a very, very short period of time. In the case of oranges and bananas and what have you, you want to get through as rapidly as possible. But they're not released until a certain paperwork is filled out and everything is deemed to be in order. And in the case of fresh produce, until the inspectors have gone around with little strips of paper that have chemicals on them and tested for all sorts of different diseases and what have you. When you impose a tariff, you say, oh, and by the way, we also won't release these items until you pay the tariff. The importer pays the tariff, which means that the importer then has to pass on that increase. So if the biltong was tariffed at 33 and a third percent of its value, which is $15 a kilogram, it would then 33 and a third percent of 15 is 5. You add $5 to 15, that makes it $20. You can now no longer sell the biltong at $20 because you won't make any profit. And of course, you have costs, hard costs like floor space and the people who have to take an hour out of the day to pack the stuff on the shelves and the transport from the bonded warehouse all the way across the USA to Kentucky or whatever the case may be. So you have to jack up the price at once. You might jack it up to $25 a kilogram. Now, that's well and good, but of course you're going to lose customers.
Yeah.
The moment that you increase the price of anything in life, there will be what's known as a bell curve or a normal distribution. In the beginning, when a change is very slight, then the very few people are influenced. At some point, there's a middle point where the greatest number of people is influenced to not purchase the product, to decide that it's unaffordable. And at the end of the bell curve, the sine wave, you have the 6 or 7 billionaires who don't care whether it's $30 a kilogram or $3,000 a kilogram. It's immaterial to them. So that effect completely tapers off. Excuse me. Now, the problem is that although South Africa only exports about 10% of its exports to the USA, so it's not like it's 30 or 40 or 60%, our economy is at the moment so fragile and in such a difficult circumstance, let's say, a rough condition, that we can't afford as a country any more harm to be done to our economics and finance. It's just, if you imagine, you get into a punch-up in a bar, very serious punch-up, you smash one another half to smithereens, and then you walk home, and now two guys confront you. Under normal circumstances, you might think to yourself, yeah, see, I can handle these two guys. But when you're already sporting a broken jaw, a broken leg, and a broken arm, you can't take much more punishment. And that's the circumstance in which South Africa finds itself. It's not that these tariffs are the end of the world to all of our exports. They only threaten 10% of our exports, and not all 10% is going to be affected at the same time. It's not as if 10% is going to be wiped off.
Yeah.
A certain number of customers will be lost, and time will tell what is that number of customers. So whether all 10% of, as I say, it's not going to happen, but theoretically, we're going to lose 10% of our exporting capacity, or we're just going to lose a fraction of 1%, time will tell. The problem is the tariff that's being proposed, in which will be implemented tomorrow, the 1st of August, by the USA, is 30%. So Donald Trump said, in my adjudication, there needs to be a 30% tariff imposed upon South Africa for the playing fields to be leveled between us. There are some exceptions. There are a number of exceptions, such as counter-seasonal fruit. So somebody in the USA obviously said to him, look, because we're in the Northern Hemisphere, we can only produce avocados in September, for example. I don't know what is the avocado growing season in the USA or in Mexico, which is also in the Northern Hemisphere, but let's say it's September. And avocados cannot be produced year-round. If you take away, if you limit our ability to import avocados from South Africa, it means that no restaurants in the USA will be able to produce guacamole as part of their offering for a meaningful portion of the year. This is serious. And Donald Trump might be very, very partial to guacamole from avocado flesh. I don't know. So there are a whole bunch of exceptions, the rare earths and all sorts of other things. But in general terms, a 30% tariff. Now, he's also threatened, and excuse me, to impose a 10% tariff on countries associated with BRICS. And there's every reason to believe that that might be manifested. He is turning out to be extremely mercurial, you know, like quicksilver. I think you call it kook in Afrikaans.
Yeah.
that little silver metal, mercurial. You don't know what mercury is going to do next. It's off this way, it's off that way. You try to bring it back in a little children's game to a certain little hole or something in a glass container, and it's to take you an hour to achieve such a simple task. So he is turning out to be mercurial, unreliable, undependable, kind of feckless. And you might say, well, that's great. That's what I love about him the most. He's always trapping everybody offside. No problem. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I am saying clearly he's not constant. So he may change his mind. But if the tariff threats of recent months are anything to go by, he's probably going to see that through to some extent. So let's say the South Africa's 30% is jacked up to 40%. So we have a 30% tariff as a general tariff, and a trade tariff, and a 10% trade tariff because of our association with BRICS. You will find that many suppliers or distributors or importers in the USA will begin to ask themselves if they can't get the same product elsewhere. Now, given that he's made these exceptions, the exceptions that suit the USA, presumably all of the non-exceptions are items that, or goods or services or whatever, that you can get anywhere. Clearly the USA, or Donald Trump, has chosen not to make itself vulnerable by tariffing those things that it really wants and needs from South Africa. So presumably the other things are things that they can get from Australia, New Zealand. I'm thinking now of Southern Hemisphere countries. Of course, the Northern Hemisphere countries too. For instance, mohair. Mohair from mohair goats. We are the largest producer of mohair, or we were until fairly recently. I don't know what may have changed. I'm using figures from some time back. We were at some point the largest producer of mohair in the world, largely in the Graaf-Reinet, Aberdeen districts and surrounding districts. Mohair goats come from Turkey. They're not unique to South Africa. So if somebody's importing mohair into the USA for fancy garments, and the price goes up by 40%, and they're worried about losing markets, gee, I make these beautiful mohair jerseys and I sell them for whatever, $100 each. But golly gee, I don't think that my people, my regular clientele, are going to like it very much if I go up to $140 each. I'm afraid that they will move to rabbit mohair or to cashmere or to some other very special animal fiber. I wonder if I can't get them elsewhere, these fibers. Let me ring up my friend Ahmed in Turkey and hear if they've got mohair. So the great threat beginning tomorrow is that importers in the USA are going to turn their backs on South Africa, not to the extent of 50% of our exports or 35 or even 25, but a portion of the 10% of our exports that we export to the USA. And that's kind of a summary of the whole affair, Marius, and maybe it will help people who don't understand tariffs, who didn't study economics at university, or not, business boffins. They've got their own strengths, just to understand better in very simple terms, and it is a simple concept, what this is all about.
Yes. Yeah, Simon, I'm definitely a layman with this as well. Like you said, our economic situation in the country is basically on a knife's edge. And now tomorrow with the tariffs kicking in, How long do you think, if you can make a prediction, will it be for the people to see a difference in our country? Let's say with SASSA money or the amount of goods you can pay or price hikes or whatever. Will it take a month to sort of like give that ripple effect where it will physically touch our wallets or see something happening in the country, like the SASSA grants maybe becoming a little bit less, or do you reckon like 6 months it will be like a full effect now that let's say the citrus and that type of exports has gotten a 10% or 15% dock that they can't export to the USA?
Well, in some cases, they're going to find alternative markets. So there's huge citrus growing outside of Port Elizabeth. I forget the exact the region, but roughly a little bit inland of Port Elizabeth, a lot of citrus growing.
Yeah,
Those citrus,
potentially that side of Port Elizabeth. Yeah.
yes, Hankey, yes.
Yeah.
Those those citrus farmers and their representative organization, the Citrus Growers Cooperative of Hankey and Potensi, or the South African National Citrus Growers Association, is going to be already on the telephone to Europe and China and Japan and other places, asking them if they want to import citrus. Lovely South African citrus, tastes the best, it's the freshest. You can't do any better. So in many cases, alternative markets will be found. However, in the case of South African motor manufacturing, and I have no idea how many cars we export to the USA, it might be a teeny tiny amount. But Port Elizabeth and its nearby city of East London depend very much upon motor manufacturing. You've got Mercedes in East London and VW in Port Elizabeth. And those two industries keep those towns alive.
Yeah.
And those two towns are the beating heart, or hearts, if you like. What is it? An octopus has 7 hearts or something like that, of the Eastern Cape province. If that industry, which is already under unbelievable pressure, because our steel production in South Africa is closing down, and because that industry has never been spectacularly successful. It was subsidized, it was helped, etc., but we were never able to achieve the production efficiency or the marketing success that, say, Japan achieved. We were never one of the great motor manufacturing centers of the world. And of course, we have Ford here, Mazda, Mercedes, the first plant outside of Germany of its sort in the world. But they were never, they produced good vehicles, no problem, but they were never terribly competitive by world standards. We were never a threat to the USA or Europe or Japan or now China. I've just come back from Russia, as you know, where the penetration of Chinese vehicles is possibly 40%. I don't know. I estimated at the time. I endeavored to estimate, and I came up with, in my mind, a loose figure of 40%. That may be way out. I might just have been in the wrong places. Where there's a bigger Chinese presence, it might be balanced out by other factors in other places. Let's say it's only 20%. Overnight, Chinese motor manufacturing has become a massive thing in the world. And that's another threat to South African motor manufacturing. So if it happens that VW and Mercedes, for instance, lay off 5,000 workers in Port Elizabeth and East London over the next, say, there are contracts engaged in advance. So it will take time for this thing to be felt fully. So I'm going to say in 6 months' time, let's say Mercedes and East London lay off. I beg your pardon, East London and Port Elizabeth's motor manufacturers lay off 5,000 or 10,000 workers. that will kill those two cities. They will very rapidly become a shadow of their former selves. And that may lead to instability in those regions. Very, very, very many people, as for our English language viewers who don't know South Africa, there is a kind of a social system built around an income earner, whereby an income earner who's earning, let's say, for the sake of a number, $1,000 a month, will spend perhaps $800 or $900 on himself. That is to say, him, his children, his wife, his interests. And another $100 will be sent to his mother, to his sister, to his unemployed cousin, and very often children will be brought into the house from other families that can't look after the children. So it won't be, let's say 10,000 people are retrenched. It won't be that you've got 10,000 unhappy people. You will have the 10,000 people from those factories, plus another 50,000 from the various suppliers in and around Port Elizabeth and East London, multiplied to, let's say, 500,000 people who are now depending upon dividing up about $50 a month, 60, 65, 70 in social grants, roughly like unemployment benefits in the UK or social security in the USA. And that means starvation.
Yeah.
So in certain key areas, Marius, I think that we could see very dramatic repercussions. In others, perhaps not so much. Perhaps other industries will be able to ride out these threats better, but only time will tell. I think that you would have to have a doctorate in, orange growing or something to be able to predict.
Yeah.
I'm listening to all sorts of experts in South Africa talking about it, and to their credit, nobody is saying, I know precisely what the consequences are going to be, because the consequences are going to depend largely upon those industries' abilities to find new markets. So some will do better, some will do worse, but all in all, this is a very grave threat to South Africa, not because it's a big threat. As I say, these two guys who approach you in a dark lane, they're half your size, you're a trained black belt in karate. Under normal circumstances, you'd be able to sort them out quick sticks. The problem is that because you've already been beaten within an inch of your life just an hour ago, and you've lost a half a liter of blood, and you're sporting 3 broken bones, you can't cope with these two little pipsqueaks. And that's why so much fuss is being made by the DA and by economics experts over how South Africa has handled this matter. Yeah. And I'll give you a little insight, Marius. As you know, over years, I have hosted many journalists for Suidlanders. Many. And they would always approach me on the basis of what is cooking in South Africa, Suidlanders, how bad is it? Tell us about this, that, the next thing. I've recently been approached by 4 documentary film teams. One is one of the biggest stations in the USA. One is German. One is French, Italian. And the other one, I actually forget now where they're from. And in each case, and this was reiterated just 2 days ago while I was at the airport waiting to fly out from Domodedovo, Moscow to Turkey, the representative of the German film team said to me, well, what we'd like to talk to you about. And then she said exactly what the 3 other teams have said to me over the past few months, that they've been, trying to make arrangements to come and visit me in South Africa for a few days. And I've been saying, oh, well, I'm in Russia. I've extended my tour. I won't be back then. Sorry to mess you around. But there has been a consistent theme, or a theme in multiple parts. Let's say consistent themes. How things are in South Africa, and what do you say about Donald Trump and Elon Musk and what they've said? In other words, the world is looking at South Africa differently. Yeah. The whole world is no longer approaching me for an interview 5 days at Louis and Marguerite Hutton's farm up in the mountains, as we like to do. It's absolutely magnificent. You create a fantastic impression about the Boer folk, about Boer families, about Boer culture, about Boer religion, practiced Christianity. It's absolutely marvelous. They now want to come for 5 days or 2 days or 3 days, depending, one day. And they want to discuss not just Suidlanders and what does Simon Roche say about this, and what is Louis Hutton doing over there, and how many children does beautiful Marguerite have. They want to know, what do you say about Cyril Ramaphosa sitting in the White House saying, no, we're not only murdering farmers, we're killing everybody. Because that's effectively what he said.
Yeah.
He said, it's wrong to look at the farm murders just as farm murders. That's white people being precious. Everybody's dying.
Yeah.
And then, I forget now who was the silly twit who said it. Oh, dear me. And then you have one of his henchmen saying, oh, yes, and by the way, it's not just murder. Do you know how bad the rape is in South Africa? So you have these guys who are more suited, as in terms of their personalities and their characters and their instincts, to being clowns than politicians. It's just, I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I'm just saying we all have strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And these guys are clearly, they have a greater aptitude for performing as fools in a ring, tripping over their own shoes, than representing an entire country, and much less trying to govern it back home. And so, as I say, that's why the economists and others are up in arms, because what they're seeing is a very, very vulnerable patient about to be subjected to another wound, injury, illness, malady, sickness, call it whatever you like. And they're saying, heavens above, we can't take much more of this. So that's the long answer to your short question, Marius.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, no, I think you've summed it up perfectly. You've painted a nice picture of how the people are treating it, and it needs to be treated as such, because being on a knife's edge, you never know when you're going to tip over. And this might well be it that starts the riots and that starts all kinds of things. So yeah, no, I think you've summed it up and painted the picture perfectly, Simon. Well, I think this is the end of our program. We've got a couple of minutes left. Anything you'd like to add just before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I will say this very briefly. People must bear in mind that South Africa's economy and financial infrastructure and banking and related economy, finance, banking are rooted in Europe. If the world experiences seismic changes, we will not be immune to them because we're in BRICS, for instance. So in other words, let's say tomorrow BRICS brings out a BRICS currency, and it threatens the dollar, and there's all kinds of dramas and everybody's getting smacked. South Africa won't be immune to that if there is a threat to Western banking, because our banking and finance and the economy that is financed by big banks goes back to the West. And that's just a point worth mentioning. And I'm not going to speak for long about it. As I said, I'd be brief. But it's very important to recognize that we are very, very, very vulnerable, both to dramatic moves in the West, as we're seeing now by America, and its knock-on effects in Europe, and vulnerable to any drastic changes that might be undertaken by our new best friends in the East. Obviously, BRICS is not entirely East. Brazil is in the far West. But just to generalize for 1 minute, our call it Eastern and Southern friends in the BRICS. So we are in a peculiarly vulnerable situation at a time when the bus driver, the train driver, use whatever analogy you prefer, is not competent to the demands of the task.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that now in the dealings with the USA. Everybody's saying, why didn't you send somebody sooner? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? You people have done a shockingly bad job of trying to remedy the situation. And so we're in a particularly vulnerable situation where we've got a girlfriend on the one side and a wife on the other. You know, we come out of Western traditions of banking and finance, and everything tracks back to there. Even our functioning mines, loans, were not provided by Capitec. They were provided maybe 10% by a consortium of ABSA, First National Bank, etc., that took on 10% of the risk to mitigate the risk. And you're talking about hundreds of billions. And the other money was received from the West. We are financed by the West, but we have chosen to look eastward, which is well and good, fine. But it means that if you don't do a good job, you might find yourself being abandoned by your wife and your girlfriend, to continue the analogy, on the same day. And so, as I say, we're in a particularly vulnerable position at a time when the leadership that we require has to be outstanding, and it's not. It's awful. And that's all from me, Marius. Hopefully that closing message managed to bring together a few strands of the argument or of the subject in people's minds.
Yeah. Well, Simon, it's good to have you back on South African soil. I hope you have a fantastic evening, and then we'll speak soon again.
I'm going to braai with at least one, maybe two of my sons, so it's bound to be fantastic.
That's it. Okay, Simon. Cheers, man.
Cheerio. Bye-bye, Marius.
Bye.